sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we can't see. So welcome to the Nothing to Hide Hidden Health Stories podcast. Why I'm starting this podcast? Because I wanted to create a space where people like myself with IBD and stoma bags, or just any hidden health condition in general, can talk honestly, not through filters, not through medical advice, but just real people sharing real stories. Because there's so many of us who are walking around carrying invisible battles every single day, and it can be a lonely place. It can be a lonely place when people don't understand your condition, and it can be a lonely place when you know how unpredictable your condition is. But what I've come to realise is that sharing our stories, we can help someone else feel seen, and we can help break stigmas. So this podcast isn't just about illnesses or the negatives. It's about the strength, the resilience and the hope. But most importantly, it's about the people behind the diagnosis. So each week, I'll be sitting down with guests from all walks of life, all different paths. People with IBD, people with stomas, people with autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, rare conditions, and even family members who have perhaps been there for people close to them who have gone through these conditions. And we'll talk about the highs, the lows, the embarrassing moments. I've had plenty of them, and the wins, the lessons, and even the humour that keeps us going as well. So my name's Scott, and I've lived with ulcerative colitis for over 13 years now, a condition that's taken me on a journey that I never expected, but definitely one that's tested me physically, mentally and emotionally. And I've been through surgeries, setbacks and perhaps more hospital appointments than I can count. But today I live with a stoma bag, and I'm not ashamed to say that. But through it all, I've learned something that I'll never forget. And that is that health is the most important thing in this world before anything else. So my story, it's strange when you look back on life and how it can change without even realising at the time. But I first noticed something wasn't right when I was around 17 years old. And like most people, I tried to brush it off. I didn't think anything of it. And I started realising symptoms that just weren't normal. I started going to the toilet 15, 20, 25, 30 times a day at some times and at some points. And I knew it wasn't right because it's got to the point where I then couldn't control it. And being so fit and active at the time, it then started to affect my performances in the gym, playing football, and just physical activity in general. But I just wanted to live my life. I didn't want to be the ill one of the family. I didn't want to be the ill one at my group of friends. And I wanted to just do all the normal things at that age. But after months of perhaps trialing different solutions and then finally getting a diagnosis of ulcerative colitis, I then got put on a variety of different medications to try and control my condition. And eventually I found that medication which did control my condition, and for years I've lived a normal life and I didn't even realise I had ulcerative colitis. But then in 2019, I suppose everything came to a standstill, and I had 2 blood clots on both my lungs. And I never saw that coming because, again, I was young, I was healthy, or what I thought I was anyway. And I suppose that was my first kind of real wake-up call in life. And it was a wake-up call to prove that I can't take my health for granted. But fast forward after that and getting through that stage of my life, then I then decided to have the COVID jab like most of us. I know there's a lot of people who decided against it, but at the time, wanting to go on holiday and wanting to go abroad, I ended up taking the COVID jab, and it seemed to mess with my medication I was on at the time. And I started realising symptoms perhaps that weren't normal, or symptoms that were creeping back in from when I was first diagnosed with colitis. And I ignored them at first. I tried to convince myself nothing was wrong, tried to convince myself I was good, I was fine, and it'll pass. Because I'd never been in a flare-up. But then quietly it started creeping up on us, and one day I couldn't control it, and I was having accidents, I was losing control, like I said, and both physically and mentally, I just found myself drained. And I find myself in moments where I just thought, how has this become my life? Because at some points I couldn't even leave the house because mornings were just a write-off for us. And it's one thing to be in pain, but it's another to lose your confidence, your sense of self. I felt embarrassed. I felt trapped. Like, no one really understood what was happening behind the smile because I always tried to stay positive. And I suppose the turning point for me was when things started to shift and I realised I had two choices. I keep hiding or I start owning my story. And I began to look for solutions after a range of different medications, infusions, medical advice. And I started to take things into my own hands. And I started looking at natural ways of healing my body, as I definitely didn't see myself taking IV steroids as a long-term solution, which sometimes when I was in hospital, it was almost like specialists were pleased that my condition was clearing up, if you like, but in reality, in my opinion, it was just, all it was doing was masking it. And after attempting everything I knew of at the time of my knowledge, after 3 years of experiment, I just wanted to get my life back, and I decided to go down the route of colorectal surgery, where I'm now living with a stoma, and it's given me back control in ways I perhaps didn't expect at the start. It's not always easy because sometimes mentally it's a challenge just as much as physically, but the surgery I've had has given us a sense of freedom back. And do you know what it is? I've learned that vulnerability isn't a weakness, because you can use it as power. And what I will say to people is, you can have 99 problems, but when you have a health problem, you only have one problem, and it changes the way you see everything, what matters, who matters, and how precious it actually is, and how grateful we should actually be to feel well. There's some rough times, but at the same time, people can learn. And I know from my position and what I've been in, I've taken so much out of what I've gone through in the past. And if you're listening right now, what I will say is, you're not going through something no one else can see, because people can't see you. And I want you to know this: you're not invisible, because you're not broken, and you're definitely not alone. There might be times where you do feel all of these, but your story matters, and maybe hearing others share theirs, you'll start to see how strong you already are, and that at the end of the day, there is nothing to hide.